The Toronto Raptors this season have been a team in desperate need of depth. After failing to get any sort of success out of so many of their free agent signings, it really felt like one finally had shown through in the point guard position, but the Raptors left him off of their playoff roster. So in today's video, we're going to go through the ugly truth behind Masai Ujiri not converting Jeff Dowtin's contract to a standard NBA deal. Let's get into it. The Raptors are set to embark on their quest in the play-in tournament to get themselves into the NBA playoffs this season, and they've done that in spite of having very limited depth with their team this season. There have been plenty of free agent signings that have come into the team, but there really hasn't been any sort of success on the court. That is except for with one player. And as I said in the intro, that man is Jeff Dowtin Jr. in the point guard position. He was signed to the Raptors for their summer league team and really impressed fans as well as the front office. He was given a chance on a two-way contract, and though we saw very limited spots of him in the NBA in the first half of the season, it looked pretty clear as though we had some talent there. And in the second half of the season, where the depth really became a problem with the Raptors through injuries and more, Jeff Dowtin was a player that provided stability in the bench minutes that the Raptors had lacked so much over the course of this season. But the issue that Jeff Dowtin provided was that he was on the two-way contract, and two-way players in the NBA only have an eligibility to dress for games a total of 50 times, and those players are not eligible for the playoffs, and they are also not eligible for the play-in tournament. We wanted to make sure it wasn't just a small stretch of games of impressive play from Jeff Dowtin, but every time he stepped on the court, he was prepared to provide a role for this team. He wasn't the flashiest player. He wasn't a guy lighting up the box score, but he was a player that, again, provided the stability on the court that this team so desperately lacked over the course of this season. And recently, his 50 games of eligibility hit the limit. He is no longer eligible to play for the team. And as we got closer to the play-in tournament, fans were begging, demanding the front office convert him to a standard NBA contract to make him playoff and play-in eligible. However, the conversion never came, and at this point we now know confirmed it is not going to be coming. So how did we get to this point with a team so depleted of depth, having struggled so much to find any hits, any success with their free agents? How do we get to a point here when we finally find one who's going to help this team? He's left off the play-in roster. Well, to answer that, we have to reveal Masai Ujiri's ugly truth. And before we do that, I want to let you guys know that my name is Jacob and I run this channel, Amateur Sports. It's dedicated to Toronto Raptors content, reaction to news, coverage of reports, reaction to games, and so much more in videos, live streams, shorts, and more. So if you like what you see from today's video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Help me on my road to 14,000 subs, and in return, you get all of that great Raptors content for the rest of this season, the play-in, the playoffs, potentially, as well as the offseason. Masai Ujiri has had a lot of problems in finding free agents with this team. In terms of the draft and what we can get out of the draft, the Raptors are one of the top dogs in the NBA at scouting talent, but the scouting doesn't translate very well to free agency. At least, it doesn't translate very well in recent years. The Raptors have had success in finding these diamond-in-the-rough sort of players. That has dried up a little bit, and it's long been a problem in the entire history of this franchise in finding key free agents that are going to come in and help these teams. That's why there's that reliance on finding the diamond-in-the-rough sort of player that Raptors fans, I mean, we pride ourselves on being fans of the franchise that so consistently find these overlooked players that can actually come in and provide a role for the team. This season, there's been a lot of issues in finding that sort of player, and the team this season was desperately in need of finding additional help for the bench. We were long toying with our bench, trying to get any sort of neutrality from it, and Nick Nurse, our head coach, even in a press conference spoke about how we don't need the bench to succeed, really. We just need the bench to stay as a neutral, not make the game worse. Even if the bench makes it a little bit worse there, we go into a little bit of a deficit because of the bench. That is okay because our starters can make up for it. Like, that's literally what Raptors head coach Nick Nurse said, and he was telling the truth with the team. That's just a reality with the bench. But one player in particular who has actually been a benefit to the bench in the free agent spot is Jeff Dowtin. This is not a player, again, that is lighting up the box score, but is a player that is definitely benefiting the team by being there. And that's just flat out not something that you can say for so many of the players on this team. But the reason he is not going to be converted to that standard NBA contract is because it will make Masai Ujiri look bad, because there is a whole catalog of errors from the front office this season that has led us to this point where the front office can no longer afford to highlight those errors any further. Let's start with near the beginning of the season with Malachi Flynn. The Raptors have a lot of point guards on this roster who do not get any game time whatsoever because they're just flat out not NBA caliber. Malachi Flynn is the first one we're going to be talking about on this list. Malachi Flynn this season, I mean, we understand as Raptors fans, it just looks like it's not going to work out for the player. We drafted 29th overall in the 2020 draft. The Raptors, though, they had the option to not extend him for a further year. There was a team option on the 4th year of his contract. And in such confusing manner, the Raptors gave Malachi Flynn his 4th year option early on in this season. They had a whole year to think about this sort of thing and what they wanted to do with the player. But at the start of the year, near the expiration to make a decision on that extension, despite Malachi Flynn having really shown nothing in the NBA so far to suggest he deserves that team option 4th year, the Raptors gave it to him. And what we've had this season is, again, consistently somebody who's not providing anything for this team at the NBA level. If you go further down the list of players that are on standard contract available for the play-in game who are inferior to Jeff Dowtin, you can also talk about Dalano Banton. Now, Dalano Banton's contract situation is a little different. The Raptors are not guaranteed to pay him any sort of money next season, but in and around the trade deadline, multiple credible sources say the San Antonio Spurs were interested in acquiring Dalano Banton via trade. And of course, the Raptors did end up making a trade with the San Antonio Spurs when they got Jakob Poeltl to the team, and it cost him 2 second-round picks and a first-round pick. Now, there's no confirmation to this, but I firmly have belief that if the Raptors wanted to give Dalano Banton in the trade, they could have withheld a second-round pick in the process that went to the San Antonio Spurs. And not only do you get value for a player that probably isn't even going to be on your team next season in Dalano Banton, you also open up a roster spot on your team for a player like, let's say, Jeff Dowtin, who again was providing positivity to your team that Dalano Banton has not done at all this season other than the away game at the Detroit Pistons. As if that's not enough, roster spots have been open for this team twice this season. The Raptors cut Justin Champagnie at the turn of the year. I thought that was a poor decision from the team for a player that has shown the ability to play so many different roles for this team. Justin Champagnie in the G League can be the primary option, can score at all 3 levels, can create shots for himself. But at the NBA, he's a spot-up shooter. He's an excellent rebounder, especially on the offensive end for his position, and is ready just to stay in the corner and stay out of the way and do a job for the team. But that player was cut in December, January area, and now he's on the Boston Celtics, as we saw in yesterday's game. And to go further down the list, that opened up the roster spot for the Raptors to sign anybody. They decided to go with Joe Wieskamp. And since signing Joe Wieskamp to a contract guaranteed for the rest of the season and non-guaranteed for next season, he has not played a single meaningful minute in the NBA. And when the Raptors opened up another roster spot by waiving Juancho Hernangomez, they signed Will Barton, who has been severely underwhelming in his time with Toronto so far, showing an inability to hit threes, an inability to scoring in general, other than that game against the Charlotte Hornets. So, the Raptors, the amount of decision-making that has gone into the roster this season, when all throughout the season, you've had the player that could have helped your team on a 2-way contract. That is extraordinarily frustrating as a fan to see, because Malachi Flynn should not be on guaranteed money. Dalano Banton, if you're not going to use him, should have been included in a trade to the San Antonio Spurs. I'm out of fingers here, but Joe Wieskamp should have never been signed if he was not going to play any sort of role at all for this team. That's just a complete waste of a roster spot. Will Barton is one I can forgive, because you know what? That was a good player to take a flyer on. But it's just, there's been a whole catalog of errors this season, that error after error after error, that the front office does not want to highlight and showcase any further. Because the reality is they have to accept one of these key errors over the course of the season with the roster construction to sign Jeff Dowtin. Because the only players you're going to waive to sign Jeff Dowtin are going to be potentially Malachi Flynn, Dalano Banton, Joe Wieskamp, or Will Barton. These are all players who the Raptors have shown a commitment to for this season. Dalano Banton by not putting him in a trade to the San Antonio Spurs. Malachi Flynn by giving him his team option for next season. Joe Wieskamp and Will Barton by guaranteeing their contracts for the rest of the season. The front office has committed to the wrong players for this season. They don't want to showcase and highlight that mistake by cutting one of them to make room for the player that is actually helping this team in Jeff Dowtin. You could also talk about Thaddeus Young, who's guaranteed $1 million next season. That's definitely something that the Raptors can eat, but there's a valuation on the veteran presence that he brings to the team, especially for a potential play-in and playoff run here. So I understand not wanting to get rid of him. But that's another player that is taking up a roster spot, has absolutely no role in this team, and it's another mistake by the front office giving him that contract in the previous offseason. So all of these mistakes currently on the roster are taking away that roster spot away from the player who was not lighting up anything for the team, not creating any sort of humongous buzz around the league. However, it is a player that, given the dire situation for the Toronto Raptors in terms of their depth, that was going to help us. And when you're going into a play-in tournament, which we've known about for a couple weeks now, we're a play-in team. We've known that. We're not going to make a top 6 seed. When it comes to the play-in tournament, it's one and done. You lose, you're out. There is no room for error. So why not bring in a player? He's only going to get 12 minutes maybe in a play-in game. But those 12 minutes, as we've seen so many times this season, are capable of being the difference between a win and a loss for this team. The Raptors have had so many games this season where the stars have done everything they could, but a small 8, 10, 12-minute window with the bench on the court has completely cost them the game and caused them to lose the game. Some of that can be alleviated with Jeff Dowtin on this team. And the fact that the front office made the commitment to this fan base at the deadline, whether it's the commitment you want or not, they made the commitment on the direction of winning at the NBA trade deadline when they traded away those draft assets to acquire Jakob Poeltl. They said they wanted to be a winning team. They said they wanted to make the play-in tournament. So they went pretty much all in on winning for this season. But when it came down to the end of the season, where we really need that commitment to shine even further, they've backed away. They've refused to convert Jeff Dowtin's contract because it would make them look bad. So they've made that commitment to winning, but when it came to the end of the season, they half-assed it. And it's left us in this purgatory situation, the absolute worst place you could possibly be in the NBA, the play-in tournament. Because the reality is, especially as a 9 seed, you get out of the play-in tournament, you're the 8 seed. You run into the Milwaukee Bucks, the best team in the NBA. You'll be lucky to go beyond 5 games in a series against the Milwaukee Bucks. But that is the fate you've accepted. You get out of the play-in tournament. You lose in the play-in tournament, you get a lottery pick. But it's a lottery pick that is much worse than the one you would have gotten if you made a commitment in the opposite direction that many of the fan base, including myself, wanted at the trade deadline. So if you're going to make a commitment to winning with this team, make that commitment and sign the player that is going to make this team better, which Jeff Dowtin has clearly showcased to everybody that he makes this team better. But yesterday against the Boston Celtics, he's in street clothes on the sideline. And when asked about it, Jeff Dowtin said he's going to be the best cheerleader for this team. Like, for a team that prides itself on signing good characters as well, it seemed like we really found one here in Jeff Dowtin. Now, Jeff Dowtin is not the separation between winning or losing a playoff series. But you know what? That short spell with him on the court could be the difference, as I said, between winning and losing a play-in game. And when the franchise, the front office, has made that commitment to winning, it's extremely frustrating that they are refusing to put this team in the best position to win based off of the fundamental errors they have done on numerous occasions over the course of the last year or two in terms of roster construction for this team. The fact that Jeff Dowtin, who on any other playoff roster should really be like a 12th to 15th man, and fans in Toronto are demanding he signed, is a further highlight to how dire the situation is with this team and its bench. But that's the position the front office has put us in. And they want to put this team in the best possible position to win. Jeff Dowtin Jr. should have been converted to a standard NBA contract, and the only reason he hasn't been is because the front office does not want to admit one of their many mistakes over the course of the season. What do you guys make about Jeff Dowtin not getting signed to a standard NBA contract? Do you think it was a bad decision, a good decision? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, because that is it for me for today. If you guys did enjoy this video, just know I'm putting out great content for the rest of this season, for the play-in, possibly the playoffs, but the offseason is where the content is at its best on this channel. So get subscribed to Amateur Hour Sports today. Help me on the road to 14,000 subscribers. I promise you, if you like the Raptors, you're going to love Amateur Hour Sports. I'll see you next time for another video or tomorrow's watch party as the Raptors play the Milwaukee Bucks.